What's going on, guys? So in this video, I'm going to tell you how I was able to buy my dream house at age 22, and I'm going to tell you every step I took to be able to be in a position where I can afford a house like this. I'm going to tell you what I did, I'm going to tell you how I made my money, and I'm going to tell you every single thing that brought me here, and I'm also going to tell you exactly what you need to do in order to prepare yourself to be able to buy a house when the time is right. So with that being said, let's jump right in. So the story starts back in 2014. That's the year where me and my family ended up moving to the US from Ethiopia. If you're not familiar with where that is, it's an East African country. That's where I was born and raised, more specific in Addis Ababa. So at that point it was me, my mom, my younger brother, and my dad that moved to the US. And my dad had to move back to Ethiopia because of some work-related issues. So it was just me, my mom, and my younger brother that were just here living by ourselves. At that point, my mom had to work multiple different jobs, day and night, and even sometimes to make ends meet. And I did not like that. I wanted to be able to help as much as I could. So I ended up getting my first job at Subway, making around $8 per hour. Given the fact that I didn't really have a lot of job experience and I didn't really know where to go to, I was told to go to this specific Subway, which was actually 2 hours away from where I still live in, using Metro. Because at that point, my mom did not have a car, and the only way of transportation that I had was taking the bus to work. And most of the time, I go there after school, and I even fall asleep on the bus, on the way there, on the way back, which was a little bit of a struggle given the fact that I had to come back and actually end up doing homework right after. So after working at Subway for a few months, I ended up getting a new job at PetSmart. I started off as a cashier, but later transitioned into working in the grooming salon. And my main responsibility in that grooming salon was washing dogs and doing their nails. That was my main responsibility. And even though I like dogs and you get to pet dogs here and there, it was a difficult job. There was dogs that were very difficult to work with. There's times where you get bit. There's times where, a lot of things happen. So after that fact, I wanted to find something else that I can get more money from. So instead of putting PetSmart and finding something that pays me more, I ended up getting multiple different jobs at the same time. So I ended up applying for a restaurant to be a server, where I later realized that it's not as easy, and I had to memorize all these different drinks and food. And to be honest, I don't really have the best memory, so I ended up becoming a busser at that restaurant. And to be honest, that was one of the hardest jobs that I had to do, because most of the hours were in the evening, and you don't get to decide what time that you work and what time that you leave. As long as the restaurant is busy, and as long as the bar is busy, you have to stay there. There was times I had to work until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, until the restaurant closes. I had to go back home, get ready, and go back out to school the next day. So that was definitely one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with while going to school. While working those two jobs, I wanted to find something that I have more control of. I wanted to have flexible hours, and I wanted to make sure that whatever it is that I'm doing, I want to have the control of how much money that I make. I want the money that I make be dictated upon the amount of work that I put in to make that happen. One of the opportunities that I saw while I was working at the restaurant was there's a lot of delivery drivers coming in and out. So that got me curious. So I ended up having to look into delivery driving and how much I can potentially make, and I got hooked. And to be able to be a delivery driver, I obviously had to get a car. At that point, I didn't even have money to be able to afford a $1,500 car. So I ended up borrowing $1,500 and bought my first car, which was a Nissan Altima from an auction. And one of the things that I realized after bringing it back home is that I did not really get a good car. At that point, I was too excited that I was gonna get my first car to be able to do that business that I wanted to do, which is food deliveries. I didn't really check the car that much, and I was young. I didn't know what to even look for. So I realized that there was holes on the ground, there was multiple different issues with the car, and after a few weeks of actually driving the car and being able to actually make my first few $100 doing deliveries, the car completely broke down. And at that point, I only had a few $100, and it was not enough to even get the car fixed, because I realized that the main issue with the car was the entire engine. I had to get disassembled, and there's few elements that had to be changed out, so I didn't really have money to do that, so I was pretty much left in the dust. After that happened, I reached out to a family member that used to work in an auto shop, and I asked for help. And he did one of the nicest things that could ever happen at that time. He offered to fix the entire car for free. He had to take out the entire engine and disassemble it and fix everything for free, which I'm super grateful of, and I honestly don't think I'll be here without that help. So if you're watching this, I really do appreciate you. So after the car got fixed, I went all in. I started doing deliveries day and night, any and every single free time that I had, I spent it working on that. And I ended up making a couple $1,000s a month, which at that point was huge for me. So I was able to help my mom with bills, which I was super happy with. And that actually led me to graduate from high school and start going to college. While going to college, I followed pretty much what my counselors and people around me told me to do, which was get into computer science, get into something related to IT, because that's where the money is. And to be honest, I went to college just so that I can get the education for me to get a job that can support me and my family. I truly did not enjoy it. So while I was going to college, I wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to start something of my own, have my own company. So one of the opportunities that I ended up looking at was starting an online business. And the first thing that came to me was selling on Amazon. I heard a lot of people saying that they're making a lot of money on Amazon, so I looked into it. I tried it, didn't really understand it, so I ended up quitting. So the next thing that I ended up doing was flipping shoes, both in person and online on eBay. The in-person part of it didn't really work that well because I actually ended up getting robbed multiple different times. So I ended up moving fully on eBay and reselling shoes on eBay. And that's the point where I was hit with something that completely changed my entire life. And that is an ad from Shopify talking about dropshipping. So the ad talked about how I can have my own online business without ever having to own inventory or any upfront cost. And that got me hooked. I did not know that was possible at that point, so I went all in. So I started reading any and every article that I could find. I started watching all the YouTube videos that were available talking about dropshipping, and I was hooked. So after learning everything that I need to know in terms of starting an online business like this, I went all in and started my first online dropshipping store in August 2017. And I actually ended up making my first sale the next day after promoting it with some of my friends. So that pretty much opened my eye to this new opportunity that I never thought would be possible. So by the end of 2017, I actually ended up making around $30,000 in profit, which is crazy for me. That was the point where I said, hey mom, we're never gonna have to worry about bills anymore. So the next year in 2018, I ended up doing over $1 million in sales, and the next year we also kept growing and growing and growing. And at that point, I was able to surprise my mom with her dream car, buy some of my own cars, be able to take care of my mom, not have to worry about any bills, and bills for her were a thing of the past. That truly fulfilled me and gave me the freedom to pretty much do whatever I want. And that's the point where I also decided to drop out of college, because at the end of the day, I was only going to college so that I can find a job that can pay me money to support myself and my family. So college was a thing of the past for me. So around the end of 2019, I actually ended up selling one of my businesses for a significant amount of money. And at that point, I was paying rent for my mom's apartment, my office space, and also my own apartment. And at that point, I decided to buy my first dream house. So after living in this house, I can truly say that this has been one of the best decisions that I've ever made, both investment-wise and also being able to have a place where I can enjoy with my family and those I truly love. So that leads me to the next thing, which is giving you the best tips to prepare yourself to be able to buy your own house when the time is right. To be able to buy a house in the US, there's two main things that you have to focus on. The first one is your credit, and the second one is your income. So in terms of credit, there's a few things that you have to focus on in order to have the best credit score. Banks typically want to look at credit score over 620, over 740 is ideal. So you want to be able to build that credit up to the point where banks are comfortable giving you a mortgage in order for you to buy a house. The first tip in order to have a better credit score is your credit history. So if you're over 18 and live in the US and do not have a credit card, I don't know what you're doing. You should probably go ahead and get a credit card. And I recommend getting a secure credit card, which you can look that up as your first credit card if you're a young person over 18. And the main reason I say that is because one of the most important things about building your credit is the history. Banks are going to think you're more responsible with credit because now they can see that you've been able to manage credit across a lengthy period of time. So the sooner you can get a credit card, the better. So you want to be able to have a longer credit history, which is one of the most important parts. So the second tip to increase your credit score is the utilization rate. So that pretty much means how much credit that you use from your given. So if you have a credit line of $1,000 and you use the entire $1,000 every single month, that's not good. Banks typically don't like to see that. They want you to use minimal. I recommend using less than 10% of your credit line. So if you have a $1,000 credit line, you want to be able to use less than 10%, which is less than $100, and paid in full every single month. That way, banks are gonna think you're more responsible given the fact that you don't use your credit as much and your utilization rate is much lower. And the third thing is making payments on time. Even if that means that you have to make the minimum payment because you don't have the right amount of money to cover the credit charge that you have, even though you should not be using your credit card for the stuff that you can't really afford, you have to make your payment on time every single month, as it makes 35% of your entire credit score. So that's the third thing that you want to focus on in order to have better credit. So the fourth one is diversification of credit. That means banks want to look at different types of credit that you can have, whether it's your phone bill, whether it's your credit card, whether it's an auto loan. They want to say different types of credit because that tells them that you're responsible with different types of credit, not just the credit card that everyone has. And the fifth tip is going to be the amount of credit inquiries that you have. So that means every single time you apply for a credit card, that's considered a credit inquiry. The more credit inquiries that you have, the more banks think you're more for risk, because that tells them that you're out there trying to get as much credit as possible, which is not a good sign for them. So only get few number of credit cards across a specific amount of time. I recommend getting at least 1 or 2 credit cards every year or 2 so that you don't have a bunch of applications within the same amount of time. So that's the last one in order to have a better credit for you to be able to qualify for a better mortgage, which leads us to the next part, which is your income. So one of the most important things that banks look at is what's called a debt to income ratio. So what a debt to income ratio is pretty much the percentage of debt that you have compared to your actual income. So if you make around $10,000 a month and you have credit card bills or car payments, that totals to around $3,000. That's what's considered a 30% debt to income ratio. So the lower that is, the better banks look at you. So you always want to keep your debt to income ratio less than 30% preferably, and banks want to see a less than 50% debt to income ratio, including the potential mortgage that they're going to be willing to give you and any other debt payment that you have. So that's one of the things that you want to focus on to keep a low debt to income ratio, because banks look at that very carefully. The other thing banks look at is your work history. So the longer you work in one place and the more stable income that you have, the better you qualify for a mortgage. So you want to make sure that you stay consistent working at one specific place for at least 2 years in order to qualify for a better mortgage at a better rate. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, whether it's the tips that I gave you in terms of how to prepare yourself to buy a house or the story of how I was able to buy my first house, make sure to go ahead and leave a comment down below letting me know what type of content that you enjoy and that you want me to keep making, and make sure you give a video a thumbs up as it really does help the channel, and also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any and all videos that I'm going to be dropping every single week to educate you and entertain you at the same time. So with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.